I just came back from a really long, really short-term point crawl from Texas back to my home base in the Northeast. And one of the things it afforded me to do was catch up on a bunch of podcasts I had missed or I had built up over time. And let me tell you, I got through a bunch. But the main one I was listening to was reading and analyzing Tolkien's writings. These are writings that he did towards the end of his life. And one of the things that came out of the quotes, and I wish I have the book. This came from Morgoth's Ring, but it's in the Studio A. I am on location at Studio B, as it were, so I don't have access to it. But it really kind of blew my mind a little bit when I heard it. It resonated with me very much. And this was a quote that arose out of Tolkien basically reconsidering the entire setup for his world building. He was trying to adapt more modern cosmology. He wasn't satisfied with the cosmology that he had essentially put together sort of piecemeal, starting from his earliest fairy stories and evolving up to Lord of the Rings. In Morgoth's Ring, there's a quote from Tolkien referencing something that he was thinking about at the time, which was this gift of holy light that was given from Eru Ilúvatar, from outside Arda, outside existence, as it were, or at least existence as we know it, into Middle-earth. And the big deal about this light was it was untainted by Melkor/Morgoth. It was not part of the song originally, so Morgoth had no power over it. And he gave this light to Varda, I believe. And then this light goes into the two trees, and then this light goes into the Silmarils. And of course, if you read the Silmarillion, you know all kinds of hijinks ensue from this. But the quote, the thing about it that struck me was, and I have to paraphrase because I don't have the book in front of me, unfortunately, was essentially that this was not a free gift, that there was a cost, there was a price, there was a danger, there was really the best thing I can say is this gift wasn't free. This gift wasn't free. So even though he was handing over this light, it wasn't something that wasn't going to have consequences, wasn't going to have costs. And there was some quote in there, something that he said about how basically the fact that it had costs would lead to a greater appreciation of the gift. And of course, knowing that this light that went into the two trees and went into the Silmarils and all the stuff that happened from there had a very great cost indeed. And what blew my mind about this was, I've often said that as a GM, I'm not someone who gives stuff out for free. I've said this many times, right? I don't give things out for free. Hey, you want a +2 sword? You go out and find it. You go out and get it. In a sense, what I saw in this Tolkien quote was a little bit of a reframing of this idea from nothing's for free to everything has a cost. And then my mind started working on it. So what does it mean everything has a cost? Everything has some kind of consequence, some kind of price you can pay. And it struck me that what this means, at least for me in the way I like to run games, and maybe what Tolkien was driving at, unfortunately I can't ask him, is that these items, and of course the more powerful item, the higher the cost, the danger, whatever, the peril involved, there is something you're going to have to pay. Maybe you pay it beforehand. You go through the horrors of some dungeon and you find the sword, that's whatever, +1 sword, whatever. You've paid the price for that already because you went through this horrible dungeon and you got this sword. And the price that you already paid is commensurate with the value of the sword, so it's free and clear, it's yours. The scales are even. Well, what if you find this +1 sword just sitting by the side of the road? Maybe then there's a cost still that has to be paid. It's not free. Maybe that means that somebody's going to come looking for that sword. Maybe if you pick up that sword was meant for somebody else. Now you've taken it. There is a cost associated with it. And I really love this. I love this idea. I love the fact that, okay, if I just have something maybe just sitting unawares somewhere and somebody picks it up, it doesn't mean that I'm giving it for free, because now I have to think about, they did that without paying the price yet. So whatever that price is, they're going to have to pay it on the other side. It's going to come looking for them, perhaps. Or somehow, in other words, the fates will intervene. In any case, You've got to even the scales. Item on one side, and then you have to bring that cost on the other side. Maybe you could pay it before, maybe you pay it afterwards, but you got to pay the piper. I love this idea. I'm really going to ruminate on this idea very much more. And for me, what it does is it allows me to keep building context around things. We always talk about it, or at least there's always a lot of discussion over, look, if you use dice to generate stuff, you can free yourself a little bit from any kind of pressure on the consequences. Because, hey, dice, right? Hey, look, I didn't do this. The dice did this. This, to me, is another freeing thing. I don't necessarily have to put all the magic in the world behind vaults and deep into dungeons. Maybe there is something that's sitting out there in a field. Maybe there is a sword that's just buried a little bit under the ground that can be uncovered. But before you just think, player character, to go and pick it up, maybe you want to think twice, because you don't know what you might be getting into. Because you know, or you should know, or I would tell you, that there's a price associated. And I think that's the other side of this thing. I'm going to use this in my games for sure. But I'm going to let the players know. Because I think, and I'm going to do a video more on this topic of what I'm about to say, which is, I'm going to make this one of my first principles. And to me, a first principle is something that from this emanates everything else. And so one of my first principles is going to be that nothing is free. So if you find a coin sitting in the street, there might be just a tiny consequence of taking it because it's just a little coin. But the more powerful the item, the higher the price. And if you as a player character, you find something and you're thinking, wow, this is amazing. I just found a Vorpal sword and it's just sitting in the grass. Well, then you should be wary because you know that you haven't paid the price yet. And that price is going to come. But maybe because you know that, maybe as a player character, you'll try to get ahead of it. Maybe you'll try to figure out, well, whose sword is this? Was it robbed from a barrow and the barrow wight is going to be chasing whoever has it? But maybe if I return it, or I can purify it, or I can do something else, that I can get ahead of the cost and pay it before the cost comes to me. Because chances are, if I just let this cost come, I have no control over it, but I can try to take control. These are the kind of questions I want players to ask. I want them to look at things and have a bit of curiosity, but also maybe a bit of skepticism. And also just think about these things. Man, I got something really powerful. Wasn't that hard for me to find it or get it? Maybe there's something up with that. Maybe there's a twist, there's a hook, there's something else going on that I'm going to need to be aware of. And because I'm going to tell them up front, I'm not going to feel bad for building that out into stuff because they're going to be well aware of it. So if they decide after everything they know, in that first principle, nothing's for free, or everything has a cost, I should say, and they decide to pick up that freebie sitting by the side of the road, well, just know, they're going to know that cost is coming, and I'm going to have a lot of fun coming up with those costs. Game on. Talk to you later.